We're talking about you supporting yourself through this prison tattooing hustle. You mentioned something else that I found really interesting, and that was, a lot of women in there were finding pen pals. And that was another way that people would go about supporting themselves.
Yeah, when I first got in there, everybody's like, you need to find a sugar daddy, you need to find a sugar daddy. And this friend of mine, Megan, she had her sugar daddy put me on Craigslist, and she wrote this ad, and it was like looking for somebody who believes in second chances. Well, these girls, I mean, they would have these guys, I mean, like putting them through college, and they're telling them.
So Shannon, thank you again for taking the time to meet with us today. We met with you for the very first time Friday, and also did the first video with you where we first got a chance to really get to know who you were. But I want to ask you, since Friday, I'm sure you got a chance to see the video that we did. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I thought it came out really good, actually. I mean, I was nervous on Friday, so I guess I'm still nervous today, but not as bad. I got some good advice actually in the comment section, so I think this is, probably a pretty good move for me.
Yeah, and we were talking about that a little bit off camera, and talking about some of the comments from the video, and you brought up, you got some good advice. One of those comments was something about how they heard in the video that you were a tutor while locked up, and that's something that you could potentially do out here as well.
Right. One of them was to check into something called Centerstone. I think it was Centerstone that somebody mentioned, and take the skills that I learned tutoring in prison and maybe put that to use out here, because that might be something that I qualify for out here. So that's definitely something I'm going to look into.
Yeah, and we're gonna help you look into that as well, because that's something that we don't know anything about. So we'll definitely look into that with you. But I want to talk about what's been taking place with you since Friday. Now, again, we met you on Friday. There were some things that you were talking about trying to get taken care of, one of which being getting an ID.
Right.
And this is crazy to think about, but that's something that is supposed to take place while you're locked up.
Right.
They're supposed to help you get this ID before you get released, but you would end up getting good time back and end up getting released before you got that chance to get the ID. So talk to us how the process has been going for you.
Okay, well, basically I went to DMV and I stood in line for, I don't know, an hour and a half, and I finally got to the front, and I had everything that I needed except for something with a proof of address, and apparently they're supposed to put this information for you on your release paperwork, and I didn't have it. So I spent $40 basically on the internet trying to get something with proof of where I changed my address, because I don't have it. My ID had expired in 2012, and I email it over to Office Depot, and they can't open the attachment, and so I basically can't print this proof of address for DMV. So I basically spend $40 for nothing. I have to go to the post office and change my address with the post office. So now I have to wait for them to mail me something. So basically I wasted a whole day with DMV.
Something that you would think wouldn't be all that big of a deal, just something as simple as getting an ID. Like you said, it took you an entire day and you still weren't able to do it.
Right, I mean, it was running around waiting for this place to email me this thing, and then once I finally learned how to save this attachment, save it and turn it into an attachment on my phone, which, because phones were still flipping when I went to prison, and now they're smartphones, and I basically had to learn how to do this, and when I finally managed to email it to them, they weren't able to open it. So it was like, it was so frustrating. The whole day was frustrating. So it was just this all-day process. And then to come out with nothing, it was like, okay, so that's one more thing I'm still going to have to take care of. But now it's like, okay, so I'll get it taken care of in a couple days. You have to have this ID to do all these other little steps that you have to take care of. I mean,
getting a job, anything.
Right, to do any of these other things that you have to do, that ID is the main thing. So it's like for the prison to release you without it, I mean, of course I still wanted to be released, even if I had to take care of it. But it's just still that one more thing on your plate. And you think that that's going to be something that's so easy, and it's just not. Like, they make it so hard for you. I had the birth certificate, and I had the Social Security card, and I had my expired ID. But it was just the fact that there was nothing with my address. I mean, I haven't been out of prison long enough to get any kind of mail. I don't have a lease paper, or I don't have a bank statement. I don't have a banking account. I don't have any kind of, credible mail from anywhere that would prove where I live. So it's not something I can prove, to DMV. And it was just a frustrating day. So at least, in a couple days, I'll take care of that. And then, from there, I went to social services, and at least, I got part of that started. So at least I took care of some of the stuff that I needed to take care of. At least, I got food stamps and Medicaid applications put in. So I don't know how long that takes to start, but you know, I have to go see a social worker still after they get their information. But at least I got some stuff accomplished. I managed to get to Goodwill and pick up a little bit of clothes. You know, so I mean, I got something accomplished. I guess, you know, it's baby steps when you first get out, but I guess those are kind of big things in the world of when you first get out of prison. I guess, you know, those are some big steps to take, but that DMV, that was just so frustrating, you know, to not even just be able to get an ID.
Well, the ball is rolling, and like you said, you've changed your address with the post office, so soon you'll receive some mail, and you will be able to get that ID. And the good thing is, you do got somewhere to stay right now, you know, so you're not completely assed out, I guess is the best way to put it. Once you're able to get this ID, then everything else is going to be able to take place from there. So I just really wanted to touch base with you in the beginning of this video, talk about what's been taking place with you since we last saw you. But more importantly, in this video, I want to talk with you about something that I know none of the folks who watch this are going to know prior to watching this, and that is something that you did while you were locked up, which is something that I did while I was locked up, and something that quite a few people have done as well. But I've never heard it from a woman's perspective, and that was that you tattooed while you were in prison.
Yes, I sure did. I spent a lot of time tattooing, actually up until the very end, when I was trying to make sure I didn't get any charges, because I was trying to get that good time back. But I spent a lot of time tattooing. I spent a lot of time drawing. But yeah, I definitely tattooed. They were definitely on to me there at the end, so I was trying to be careful.
Did you ever get in any trouble with the tattooing while you were locked up?
No, I came pretty close a couple times. You know, I got my room shook down quite a few times. They're looking for stuff, but I didn't get in any trouble.
Well, you're better than me, because I got caught at least 3 different times, and I lost all sorts of good time behind tattooing. But there are some major differences with the tattooing that I did versus the tattooing that you did. And one of the biggest differences is that you did pick and poke tattoo work.
Right.
You guys didn't have access to the tattoo machines. And you know, why was that?
I think we just didn't have access to the stuff that we needed to make it. Maybe it's, you know, where your work departments are different, or the stuff that you had to make stuff with was different, but we basically just had to use needles and thread, and, you know, some people chose to, you know, use pencils and stuff to make handles for it, but I just basically used a needle with some string. It was easier for me to hold on to, but.
You guys couldn't buy anything that had motors in it, like a pair of clippers or anything like that?
We couldn't unless you were transgender. If you were transgender, you had access to stuff like that, but we just didn't have stuff like that.
Because I think to myself, if you guys couldn't get something like a pair of beard trimmers, right? Because I think of it like this, well, you know, women, they have hair to cut too. Maybe they want to cut their hair. So why wouldn't women be allowed to order these beard trimmers? But then I think, you know, and this is probably horrible of me to think this, but what else could you possibly make with that motor? You kind of get where I'm going with this, like, where like, you know, you hear this myth as a man when you're locked up about women's prison. They're like, well, even when a hot dog tray comes, you know, that they're cutting up the hot dogs, which I can imagine is just complete
Yeah,
BS.
they don't do that. But I mean, like, for real, I mean, with the haircutting thing, we're not allowed to cut our hair. So you have to go to Cosmo to cut your hair. So if you get caught cutting your hair, somebody gets caught cutting your hair, it's a charge.
Okay.
So, I mean, and it's all about the money. You have to remember that a lot of the prison system, I believe, is set up for the money.
Right.
Quite honestly. So, I mean, like, I think they just want to make the money there. And they say it's about changing your appearance, but I believe it's because they want to make the money on it. I mean, that's my point of view on that. But, yeah, you definitely don't have access to buy things that have a motor in them. I mean, like, you sit there and you look at pencil sharpeners or something and be like, well, I wonder if I can get that, and nobody will notice it's gone, but you know that they're going to notice it's gone. Everybody's going to get shook down.
I've never met a woman who served time in prison who actually did tattoos. That was their hustle. You know, so with that, I've got a whole bunch of questions I want to ask you about this. And one of them is, how popular was tattooing while in prison, or in a woman's prison?
Oh, I mean, it's pretty popular. A lot of women don't really get sleeved out and stuff while they're in prison. I guess, at least in the prison that I was in. I mean, maybe that's something that happens in Fluvanna with like the lifers and stuff like that. But a lot of people would do like things like their children's names, or, you know, their girlfriend's names, stuff like that. A lot of people weren't getting huge tattoos. Some people were, but I mean, like with the plucking, it takes a long time, as you know. So I mean, a lot of people didn't have the time to dedicate to that, because, you know, you're kind of huddled, as you know, you're kind of huddled in a bathroom, or hiding out in somebody's room, and I mean, like, it takes a lot of time to dedicate to something, especially if you're doing something big. But a lot of names, stuff like that.
Were there other women who were tattooing as well? Did you have, like,
oh, yeah, absolutely.
competition?
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I mean, like, it's easiest to tattoo on your hall. you know, because it's harder to do, like, say, on the rec yard or something if you're trying to meet somebody off the hall. So, I mean, like, there's usually not competition right there on your hall.
So with that, with the fact that there wouldn't be too much competition, you were probably getting all sorts of work.
You are, but the problem is you got to watch out for the snitches. So if you've got anybody on your hall that you have to watch out for, you really got to kind of look out for that too. So you're not only looking out for, say, the police, but then you got to watch out for the people who are going to tell on you too.
And you know, I've said that same exact thing before. You know, it's not even really the guards so much that you got to watch out for as the other inmates, the people who are going to tell on you. It's crazy the similarities right there, but you know, with the fact that here you are, you're doing these tattoos, this is your hustle. You know, I want to ask you a whole bunch of questions in regards to this. One, what did you guys use for ink?
Well, it was the printer ink, copier ink. So.
And this was something that we would use as well. You would take the ink out of these ink cartridges, and I know plenty of people who are getting tattoos. I think this tattoo right here on my arm is completely done with printer ink. It's some good ink to use, but it's oftentimes hard to get. Can you talk to me a little bit about like how you guys would get this?
A lot of people either that worked in the storeroom would get it for us, or people would just take it right out of the offices or whatever. You know, people, the cleaning people had access to it, or people who worked in the storeroom had access to it. We really never had a hard time coming by it.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, because I mean, a lot of times we would have a hard time coming by it. I want to talk to you about like some popular tattoos that women would get. You know, I think about like what you mentioned, the kids' names and maybe a significant other. Could you talk a little bit more about like what were some of the most popular things that women were getting tattooed while in prison?
I mean, a lot of butterflies, stuff like that. You know, girly stuff. Stars, a lot of stars, stuff like that. I mean, they would have you draw up designs, you know, maybe a little tribal stuff or, you know, I mean, but mostly butterflies, hearts.
And names.
And names, yeah.
And
mostly names.
And you said like it would be either, you know, their kids' names or significant other.
Yeah, girlfriends, their husbands' names. Sometimes, you know, it would just mostly really be that. I mean, more times than not, it would be a name.
And how much would you charge for a tattoo? If somebody came to you and they wanted to get their child's name or their lover's name tattooed on them, how much does this cost?
Most of the time, I just do it for like $10.
$10.
Yeah.
Good Lord, you're expensive. You're expensive.
Oh wow, you were doing it for less?
I would do it for like $5, but you know, a lot of my buddies would tell me, they're like, Joe, you shouldn't even be breaking out the machine for less than $10.
Yeah.
So,
see, I would do it for about 10.
And what would you want? What would you want for payment? Obviously, it's going to be commissary items.
I mean, it would be commissary items most of the time, unless they had something else I wanted, something that smelled good, because you know they cut off our vendors. So I mean, like sometimes they would have something that smelled good, a lotion that smelled good, or something that they were willing to give up.
So perfumes were pretty much a big deal.
They were a huge deal, like if they still had them, because vendors had been shut off a while back. But
and this was something that women could order back in the day. You could order from these vendors and get these oils and these perfumes, and that was something that they were allowed to have, and I guess now they're not.
Now they're not, right? So I mean, you know, makeups, anything that we could have gotten off of vendors, that would be a great trade, because it's not something you could get anymore. But other than that, like coffee was my favorite thing to have, so a lot of times, you know, I would do it for like coffee creamer, sugar type stuff, you know what I mean, and then like whatever extra, you know, added up to that $10. But you know, that was always a given.
So you got to have the bag of coffee.
Yeah,
you got to have the cream or the sugar.
Coffee creamer and sugar. Yeah.
What kind of coffee were you women? I said you guys. Forgive me for that. But what kind of coffee were you guys getting? Obviously the Keefe.
Yeah,
coffee.
the Keefe coffees, and then we had the Maxwell House. We didn't have the good stuff like Fluvanna had, you know, because they had all the I can't even think of the name, like the espressos and stuff like that. See, we didn't have that in Goochland. I don't know what you had where you were at, but
we had like the yellow bag, the black bag, the blue bag.
Oh yeah, see, we had the yellow bag and the blue bag, and then we had decaffeinated or something, and then we just had Maxwell House. We didn't have a very good choice.
But the yellow bag was...
The yellow bag was my favorite, yeah. The yellow bag was my favorite. I know that's awful, but you know, you could go without anything else, but you had to have the coffee, or at least that was my experience. Like, I had to have the coffee. If I didn't have the coffee, my whole day was ruined.
So look, you know, I'm going to tell you something interesting, right? How much was the yellow bag of coffee? Do you remember?
$3.51.
Look, you know, people, they don't sell it anywhere out here, right? They don't sell it. But you can find it on websites like Amazon and eBay, and they're charging like $15, $20 a bag.
Are you serious?
I swear to God, and people are buying it. How exactly did you get into tattooing?
I think I started drawing again. You know, it was something that I did a lot when I was younger, and I started drawing again, and people started paying attention to the fact that I was drawing, and I didn't really realize, I guess maybe I never really realized that I had a talent at it like I did. And, you know, people told me that when I was younger, but people started asking me and begging me to draw stuff for them. And they'd be like, I'll pay you, I'll pay you, I'll pay you. And then, like, I started tattooing on myself first. It was something that I actually had apprenticed a little bit in Florida before I, you know, started getting
In trouble.
in trouble.
So
Yeah.
this is when you were out here in the free world. Before you got locked up, you were actually considering being a tattoo artist out here.
Right, and this was when I was about 18. This guy in Florida was letting me apprentice with him, and I only did it maybe for 6 months, and then I started getting in trouble, started doing drugs, and never really followed through with it. And you know, I guess I just started playing. You know, you get bored in prison, and it's just something else to do. And I started tattooing on myself, and then my friend was like, "Hey, do one on me," and then it was like somebody else, and then it kind of just, you know, went from there. But
You know, isn't it a good feeling, and it's kind of crazy to think about this, but isn't it a good feeling when people start to pick up on the fact that you can do these tattoos and everybody's coming to you and you know you're going to be making some money? I mean, this is going to help you during your bid. This is going to help you to have commissary in your locker, to keep your mind off of things. I mean, for me, that's how it was.
it was to a point, but then it got to a point too, like especially when you're drawing or you're doing these handkerchiefs and stuff like that, that it almost gets to be overwhelming because you don't have free time for yourself. Like, you know, you don't mind to do it, like, but it takes away from the enjoyment of it to a point too, because, you know, you want to be able to draw something for yourself, or you want to be able to have some time to yourself. Like, I don't know, that last little bit of time, I just wanted some time to myself. Like, I didn't want to draw anything else for anybody. Like, I wanted to maybe draw something for my granddaughter, wanted to just have time for myself, and people would be like begging, and I'd be like, I'm sorry, I don't have time. And it's learning to be able to say no too. Like, I had that problem maybe when I, you know, during the middle of that time, like I didn't know how to say no to people, or, you know what I mean? But I mean, it was nice. Like, it was nice that people thought so highly of my drawings and stuff, but at some point I had to like learn how to say no too, you know, because it was almost too much at one point.
Well, with the fact that you say you had a problem saying no, I can imagine you probably did some tattoos you didn't want to do. Probably did tattoos on people that you didn't want to tattoo.
I did, and some of them, it was just simply to keep them from telling on me. You know, because if I felt like if I don't do this tattoo on her because she knows about the 50 other ones that I did, like I felt like she might go and tell on these people too. Like, I had to make sure I did this one on her to keep her from snitching on anybody else, because hey, you know what, if you tell on them, you're going down too. You know, it's like, it's kind of like that's how it works. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes
So it's like the prison politics of a woman's
it's a
prison.
politics, yeah, it's politics too. So it's like, you know, once you get found out by somebody, like, you might have to do this tattoo too just to keep that person quiet.
Did you ever have that issue where like a woman came up to you and said, hey, if you don't do this tattoo, I'm going to tell?
No, but I had that issue with some Percocet one time.
Really?
Yeah. She said, if you don't give me some, I'm going to tell on you. I said, well, then go tell, because you're not getting it. And she did too. They drug tested the whole hall.
Did you fail?
No, because they tested us for hydrocodone instead of oxycodone, because she was too stupid to know the difference.
Like, what's one of the craziest tattoos you can remember that you just did not want to have to tattoo?
Oh, it was some long name that I couldn't spell, and I still wasn't even sure that I was spelling right across this girl's chest. And I don't even remember. It had some hearts on both sides.
Was this like their child, or was this like their lover? Or?
I don't know. I think it was her child, but I can't even begin to tell you what the name was. I remember drawing it on her, and I was like, are you sure that's spelled right? And I had to go look in the mirror about 3 or 4 times before I even started. But
So you did tattoos while you were locked up. You charged an exuberant amount of money to put names on people, at least $10. I'm kidding. But, you know, you were making money doing these tattoos. You were getting the things that you wanted. Was this something that you had to do, or was this something that you just did because you wanted to do it?
I mean, at some points it was stuff I had to do. It was something I had to do because, I mean, for real, I mean, like, you know, you have to still support yourself in there. It's not like the state really hands you everything. So, I mean, on some levels, like, I would do stuff because I had to have it. Sometimes I would do it for people because they were my friends. Because there were times I really didn't want to do anything. Like, it's still a risk. You know what I'm saying? Like, especially there at the end. Sometimes it was fun. Like, there at the beginning, it really was fun because it was, you know, it was just creative and it was fun, and you get to see how stuff comes out. But it was definitely a way of supporting myself because I wasn't getting money from home for real. I mean, my mom probably would have sent me money had I asked for it. Every once in a while she would, like for Christmas or something, she would send me a pretty good amount of money, but I didn't really want to ask for it, you know, all the time. I felt like it really wasn't her responsibility to take care of me because I had gotten myself into this mess. So, I mean, like, I guess it was a little bit of both. Like sometimes it's just because I wanted to do it, but sometimes it was basically because I had to.
And you know, I want to bring up another point, and this is something else that we talked about off of camera, but we're talking about you supporting yourself through this prison tattooing hustle. You mentioned something else that I found really interesting, and that was, you know, a lot of women in there were finding pen pals, and that was another way that people would go about supporting themselves.
Yeah. When I first got in there, everybody's like, you need to find a sugar daddy, you need to find a sugar daddy. And this friend of mine, Megan, she had her sugar daddy put me on Craigslist, and she wrote this ad, and it was like looking for somebody who believes in second chances. Well, you know, these girls, I mean, they would have these guys, I mean, like putting them through college, and they're telling them all these things, and I really just couldn't tell these guys all these things, so I was like pretty much honest with these guys.
You had a lot of guys that were writing to you?
I did. I probably had like 50 guys that wrote me right off the bat on JPay. I did. It was crazy, and
what were they saying?
I mean, like, I can't even tell you what they were all saying. Some of them were like wanting to talk dirty right off the bat, and I would be like, delete, because like...
Was that like the majority of it from the beginning?
No, I mean, it wasn't the majority, but there were a couple of them, and I just deleted them. Like I never even wrote them back. And I mean, like one or two of them sent me money right off the bat, and I was like, okay, well, let me talk to these guys, because you know, like this could be promising. And you know, there was a couple of them who were just like genuinely nice, and I definitely like would give them more of my conversation because they were just actually really trying to talk. But you know, I was pretty honest with these guys right from the beginning. Like I don't know, like I just couldn't do what these other girls were doing. And a couple of these girls were like, just let me talk to this guy for you, because, you know, you're not doing this the right way, and they're not going to stick around. And I'm like, look, I can't do this. Like I can't just take money from these people.
You had a moral compass.
I had something of a moral compass, because I mean, maybe when I was high, I could do this. Like, you know, when I'm high, I don't have that many morals. Let me just be the first one to tell you, like, I'll take your money, and, you know, I don't have a problem doing it. But like I after all these years, I had one guy that stuck around like the whole time, because I was honest with him. I was like, hey, I'm not coming home to you. Like, it's never going to be that way. I'm just letting you know. But, you know, and this is an actual decent guy. Like, he still talks to me. Like, I mean, he called me earlier today before you picked me up and was just checking on me. He's like, oh, you look so happy on your Facebook. I'm happy to see you're doing good. Like, you and your granddaughter look like you're doing great together, and blah, blah. But I mean, like, this guy knew from the beginning, and, you know, like, I could call him and be like, hey, you know, I'm getting ready to get my ID, which I never got, but he sent me the $16 to get my ID. And, you know, he told me, he was like, you know, you're not like any of these other girls, because apparently he'd answered a couple other ads or whatever. But I mean, it was one of the first things they told me to do when I got there, is like, you need to put an ad on Craigslist. So first thing you need to find some guy to support you. And like, I just couldn't do what these girls were doing, because I'm telling you, they have them paying for their college classes. They're not in college. They have them paying for their release. I mean, I know one girl who got bonded out from prison, okay, if that tells you anything. And you know,
she got bonded out from prison.
Bonded out from prison, okay, and you know you can't do that. So, but this guy paid her bond. So
they were just telling him anything.
They would tell him anything. Like, and there's another one who, she tells her sugar daddy all kinds of off-the-wall things, and the more off-the-wall it is, the more he believes it, and he just sends her all kinds of money, like media money, this money, the other money. And I'm like, I don't know how you do this to these people. Like,
it's crazy, because I talked about this recently, dating a prisoner. And there's a lot of women who do the same thing for the men. This was something that I saw taking place quite a bit while I was locked up. I should have definitely imagined it would probably only be intensified for the women, you know, dealing with guys out here in the free world. And so I can imagine the women would have these guys legitimately just falling head over heels for them.
oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, there's one girl, she had so much money on her books, it was ridiculous. And
I mean, how much money are we talking about here?
oh, I mean, she had like $50,000-$60,000 on her books. She was talking, I mean, she was her full-time job, okay? It was her full-time job, and I'm not even exaggerating. And she's still in prison, she's still locked up. She had one guy in Jamaica, she had another guy someplace else, and I mean, she would be on the phone with them all day long.
So this was her business?
This was her business, okay? So she would talk to them, I mean, and she would get mad at them, yell at them, hang up on them, and then call them back later and say she was sorry. I mean, they would be so upset. And she would accidentally send the wrong email to the wrong one and then cry. She would be so upset and cry because she knew she had really screwed up. And it was just funny to watch this because I knew several people who did this as like a full-time job. They didn't have real jobs on the hall. They would just sit on the phone all day. Get back in line, get on the phone, get back in line, get on the phone. And, you know, they would be like, can you send this money for this? And I need you to put this much money on this person's books. I need you to put this much money on this person's book. They're like running their little drug empire from inside the prison, you know, moving money around this way and moving money around that way for their little Wellbutrins and for their this and for their that. So it's like, it was funny to watch almost because how do you do this? Like,
and again, like I said, I did a video on this not too long ago where, you know, I talked about dating a prisoner, what it was like for the women who deal with the men who are locked up. And one of the biggest points that I brought up in that video was, you know, is the guy actually looking for love or is he looking for commissary? And 99.9% of the time, the guy is just, you know, he's just running game so that he can get the money and that he can keep himself full up, keep his locker full up. And it sounds like it's absolutely the case for the women who are locked up as well, doing the same thing to the men.
I mean, I feel like probably 99% of the time it probably is the same way because what's going to happen when she gets out? I mean, like, is she still really going to have any kind of conversation with this guy? I mean, like, or is she going to let him take her to the store and get some clothes and then haul ass, you know?
I want to get back to the tattooing real quick. And one thing that I want to ask you, look, in men's prison, there's this omen, it's almost like a superstition. And that is, you know, if you get a woman's name tattooed on you, which, trust me, there's tons of guys who want their girl's name tattooed on them. I've done plenty of those types of tattoos as well. But there's like this bad omen or superstition that if you get somebody's name tattooed on you, it's bad luck. Now, you were tattooing significant others of these women as well. Was this the same type of thinking?
Well, that's my type of thinking. I always think that, like, usually if you're coming for a tattoo, it's almost always like a last drastic measure to keep your relationship together. That's how I've always looked at it. I don't know, because you barely ever see a relationship rarely go very far after that. Like, that's just my perspective on it. Like, I saw somebody get this beautiful tattoo. I didn't do it, but it was a beautiful tattoo. It had the girl's name and like the heartbeats and some hearts after it. And like, it wasn't 3 or 4 days later, the person who got the tattoo was with somebody else. So, I mean, what were you thinking when you got this tattoo? I mean, like, obviously you were already thinking about this other person, so why were you getting this tattoo done? It's like, unless you're dead or you're related to me, your name's not going on me. Like, it's just one of the things that I would never do personally, but I mean, I guess your emotions run a little bit higher when you're in prison, like the relationships are a little bit stronger. I feel like your emotions you get more attached very quickly in prison. It's like dog years almost, like in a sense, you know? I mean, like, you feel like if you've been together 3 months, it's almost like 3 years, if that makes sense at all.
Not really, but I'll run with it. Well, look, let me ask you this. So you feel the same way, basically, like it's bad luck to get somebody's name tattooed
absolutely.
on them. But you've got these women who are getting either girls' names tattooed on them, men's names, whatever. How many girls have you seen try to get these names covered up? Is that something that also takes place?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And they just got a story to tell you, hey, look, you know, I got the tattoo, it didn't work out. What can we cover this up with?
Yeah, they do that. I've even seen people just put straight like just a black line across names just for now until they can get out. And I try to tell them, just wait until you get out, because if you try to cover it up in here, I feel like it's not gonna, you know, I feel like you'd be better off waiting until somebody can fix it with a gun, you know, because if we put too much over it now, you're not gonna be able to fix it right, you know. I tell people try to wait it out, you know what I mean?
Just walk around with that mistake for a little bit longer.
Yeah, wait until you get out, because we can't fix it that well in here. You know, I feel like you'd be better off waiting until you get out to fix that. But I think it's a mistake from the jump. I try to talk people out of it all the time when I already know what their relationship's about. Like, I'm just like, don't do it. But they don't listen, you know, they don't listen at all.
Shannon, you know, it sounds like there's a lot of similarities between men's and women's tattooing in prison, but there's also quite a bit of differences as well. And I just want to thank you for sitting here and taking the time to talk about this, because I find it super interesting that you also tattooed while you were locked up, just as I did, just as so many others did as well. Again, thank you for sitting here talking about this tattooing. I look forward to talking with you more and definitely getting into some of the crazy prison stories that I know you've got to share.
Absolutely. We'll talk again soon.